Hey guys, what's up? I'm Noah, this is Analog Resurgence, and today I'm taking a look at Polaroid's PacFilm. Instant PackFilm, from my experience and from everything I've ever seen, was probably the greatest instant film format that ever existed. There's so much to it in terms of like the number of cameras and the number of different types that were made for it and the different ways that you could use it and shoot it. And it had such a great presentation to it. We load up our PacFilm into one of these old school Polaroid land cameras. We take our picture, pull our white tab out, pull a second tab, we start a timer, and then we wait. This simple process of capturing the image and like everything that happened in the process of doing it was really amazing to behold. And of course, it always came down to that moment that we peeled it apart. Ooh, I'm glad that worked. Now, maybe most of us kind of associate instant film with the old school white border of a Polaroid integral print from a camera like the SX70 or like a Polaroid 600 camera here. I mean, for a lot of us, this is the most recognizable stuff, especially for people who maybe didn't grow up during a certain time period and didn't really experience this stuff when it was much more popular. And more so now, even a lot of people just kind of associate it with the much smaller white bordered print of an Instax from Fuji. But before all of that stuff, there was PacFilm. Now, I've already talked about the beginning of Polaroid and instant photography with their creation of instant roll film, the very first instant film format that they produced and the precursor to PacFilm. So definitely go check out that video if you haven't seen that already. At Polaroid in 1963, it was time for something a little bit different. Roll film was the primer for what Edwin Land, the creator of Polaroid, wanted to do with instant photography. PacFilm was the next step. 1963 was the year that Polaroid released Polacolor, the very first instant color film, and they did it in their existing roll format as well as in a brand new format, PacFilm. Polacolor was the very last new type of film released for roll film, but the very first type released for PacFilm. Along with this came the release of the Model 100 Polaroid land camera for instant PacFilm and a new era of instant photography. Edwin Land and like Polaroid in general during this era always had an ambition to kind of keep moving things forward in terms of instant photography. They had great success with roll film, and PacFilm was a brand new release. They were king when it came to instant film technology, and nobody could touch this stuff. I mean, except for Kodak, who tried, and in the 70s they released their own stuff, but they got sued out of the game. Also, a long time ago, I already did a video on that. And Fujifilm was kind of doing their own stuff in Japan around that same time, but more on that another time. Roll film was around for about 15 years, from the end of the 40s into the mid-1960s, before Polaroid introduced PacFilm, and along with it, a wider variety of cameras, a wider variety of ways to shoot the format, a much wider variety of film types for the format as time went on. PacFilm was the next step, and this stuff was big, and it lasted for a really long time. Hey, listen, as I do these big focuses on PacFilm, I'm doing it along with the help of my friend Alex, and we're going out and shooting a bunch of this stuff. We did it back in August with the Polaroid roll film, and we shot really expired film, but got really good results considering how old it was. So if you come back tomorrow to this channel, you will be able to see a selection of videos of times that we've gone out and shot a variety of Polaroid branded era PacFilm. So watch this video, watch the roll film video if you haven't, and stick around. And scans of all this instant stuff are also going to be posted exclusively over on the Analog Resurgence Patreon, so you can support me and support this endeavor, because PacFilm is incredibly expensive. PacFilm is instant film that requires you to pull it out of the camera, which punctures a chemical pod, and then waiting several seconds for the developing process. And then, finally, peeling the image apart for the final image, which is also why people like to call this stuff peel-apart film. Peel-apart film, PacFilm, instant peel-apart PacFilm, it's all the same stuff. It's also somewhat similar to roll film from Polaroid, but it's easier to load, and all the developing and peeling happens outside of the camera once you pull it fully out. Polaroid's PacFilm cameras can be found in two types: the folding models and these plastic body models. There's a huge variety of these cameras, but most of them look pretty similar to these. These are Polaroid land cameras, Polaroid cameras that are designed only to be used with PacFilm. So if you come across one of these, then think carefully about what you're getting yourself into, because PacFilm is hard to get into now and expensive if you do. These folding cameras have bellows that pull out with the lens at the front, a focusing viewfinder at the top, and the area for the film pack in the back. We've got our battery compartment here that powers the light meter, and you need to have a battery in the camera to take pictures. It will control the exposure time of the lens so that we get a good looking image. We've also got an exposure compensation dial here on the front as well, and this allows you to brighten or darken your image by turning it. There's also the option for selecting the film that's inside of the camera. Usually color film is 75 or 80 ISO and black and white film is 3000 ISO. Make sure this dial is set for the film that's in the camera so that it will expose properly. To focus, there's usually a rangefinder on the top here or some sort of guiding viewfinder that will allow you to focus your image by sliding the bellows in or out, which moves the lens closer or further from the film. The back of the camera opens and we have our rollers here, and this is where we load our pack film. The pack initially has a dark slide on it to protect it from exposure to the light. The pack goes into the camera and we have to make sure that all these white tabs are sitting outside of the compartment when we close the door. With the pack in the camera, you're ready to take your pictures. And I mean, the pack itself can seem pretty mysterious with all these like weird tabs and the images kind of somehow stacked in there and the whole peeling apart and pulling out process. But there is a lot of clever work at play inside of these things. PacFilm is made up of two parts, the negative component and the print component. Inside of the camera, the negative is exposed when you take your picture. The pack itself is set up and loaded in such a way that all the shots are layered into it. The negative sits at the front of the pack ready to be exposed. Once we take our image and pull the first white tab, then the negative is pulled around to the bottom of the pack into position against the paper that will have our positive image, leaving a new negative at the top of the pack to be exposed. This sandwich is ready to be fully pulled out through the rollers so that we can have our developed picture. The rollers puncture the chemical pod contained in each shot and spreads the chemicals out between the negative and print parts of the image. These chemicals start developing the negative and transferring a positive of the image onto the print for the final picture. Once we've waited long enough, we hold our breath, we cross our fingers, and we peel that image apart to give us a 3¼ by 4¼ inch print. The design of the pack is very cool, but also very complex, and is one of the big parts that makes PacFilm hard to replicate on like a smaller production scale. It's like this interconnected origami style pack that contains shuffling components, negatives, positives, chemical pods, and paper tabs that you pull. Ultimately, somehow, to get these really nice looking images. There are also some variations on PacFilm. There's 4x5 PacFilm that gives you 4x5 sized images, and it's pretty much the same as 3¼ by 4¼ PacFilm, but it's just physically a bigger pack. There's also single shot peel apart film that's meant for large format 4x5 cameras as well. And these are just single images that have chemical pods inside of them that you pull out and you peel apart one at a time. These large format versions of peel apart film are really interesting, but also a topic for another time. And there's a ton of these different PacFilm cameras from Polaroid that were made. The series 100, 200, 300, and 400, some were cheaper like this 104 here, but others had nicer lenses and were considered more pro cameras like the 190. The plastic body ones were the cheap versions of the folding models. The pack loads into the back just the same. We control focus by rotating our lens. There's the same film type selector and exposure compensation options, and we have a viewfinder for framing. These plastic body cameras were called things like the Color Pack, Super Shooter, or Big Swinger. There were also cameras like the Pro Pack and the Reporter that had a bit of a different design to them, but they worked essentially the same way. There's also the Polaroid Big Shot, and this is a PacFilm camera that's intended to be used for taking only portraits of people. And it might look kind of funny, but it's kind of a cult classic camera at this point, and the Big Shot does take really nice looking portraits of people. Polaroid manufactured PacFilm all the way from 1963 when the format was invented until Polaroid's discontinuation of all instant film products in 2008. And they did it in a ton of different film types over the years. Everything from amateur PacFilm to PacFilm that was intended for more professional uses. Mainly there's color in black and white, and these film types included type 105, 107, 108, 84, 64 tungsten, 611, 61, 664, 665, 667, 668, 669, 672, 679, 689, 690, and 691. So I'm definitely not doing like a full guide of every kind of version of PacFilm out there because first of all, I haven't shot every type of PacFilm. There's too many types of PacFilm and a lot of these films are almost impossible to get and shoot anymore. But here are a few worth mentioning. And of course for this stuff, I want to hear about people who were shooting it. People who were shooting it in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, where you were when it was ended and discontinued, and I want to hear about your experience with different film types and what your favorite stuff to shoot was. Type 668 and 669 were color films that were tailored more towards professional use, sometimes saying things like Polacolor ER, which meant extended range. Type 665 was black and white film that allowed you to wash the negative component of the film, removing the backing material and giving you a proper negative along with your print. This meant you could actually do proper darkroom prints with a negative like this, or currently higher resolution scans of them. Type 690 was some of the last PacFilm Polaroid ever made, and was apparently some of the most advanced for color. Polaroid Blue and Polaroid Chocolate were special color films that had specific tints to the images for more creative and artistic results. And the Type 80 films took square images. These sometimes required a special camera, like the square shooter and color swinger. For people who've never shot PacFilm before, either Fuji's PacFilm or Polaroid's PacFilm, PacFilm looked good. It's hard to look at as accurately and in-depth now because Polaroid doesn't make PacFilm anymore. Sure, the SX70 and the integral film that Polaroid made does spit out images that, you know, develop right before your eyes, but PacFilm had color and consistency that is now, especially with Polaroid's current stuff, completely untouchable by the quality of stuff that you could find in PacFilm format. A lot of the time it was a much more consistent kind of film, and it also had such a huge variety of ways that you could shoot and utilize the format that integral film just did not have. I will admit though that like PacFilm has a lot of waste that goes along with it. Between the negative component that gets discarded, the white tabs that get discarded, the box, the materials, a lot of the time these black and white prints still needed to be coated with like the protective Polaroid print coater, which again, has a very pungent smell, as I talked about in the roll film video. As great as PacFilm was, and as great as the pictures came out looking a lot of the time, there was a lot of waste and a lot of material that went along with it just to get these images. One of the big things about PacFilm was that you weren't limited to just shooting them in these PacFilm cameras. If you had a medium format camera, or a 4x5 camera, or a 35mm SLR, you could get Polaroid film backs that allowed you to shoot instant peel-apart PacFilm in fully manual cameras. This allowed you to put PacFilm into really nice cameras, offering you the opportunity to do manual exposure settings, different camera bodies and different lenses, different framing options, and along with those 4x5 versions of peel-apart film that I was talking about, it definitely gave some legitimacy to the idea of shooting instant film. PacFilm backs existed for Mamiyas, for Hasselblads, 4x5 cameras, even crazy backs existed for 35mm SLRs like this one for Nikon cameras. It uses prisms to reflect the image down to the pack of film in the holder below the camera. There's also ones that were more for testing out settings and would give you a very, very small image on the area of your film. There's even the Holgaroid, which is a film back for plastic Holga cameras that allows you to shoot PacFilm. Shooting instant film on these cameras could act as an easy, quick way to test exposure, to test light settings, especially on like high-end professional photo shoots. You set everything up the way you want it to look. You choose some Polaroid with an ISO of 80 or 100 or 400. Take some instant shots, make sure everything looks good, and then you can swap out and shoot that real non-instant film. Honestly, like the number of contraptions and uses and different ways that you can shoot PacFilm could be like an entire series of videos. A very expensive series of videos, but a series nonetheless. There's PacFilm devices that were meant for medical or industrial or scientific uses, things that were meant for capturing waveforms off of monitors. We've got slide printers that were meant for making small prints off of mounted slides, and a huge market for PacFilm were passport photos. Specialty cameras like this Polaroid Studio Express 203 were used for shooting passport and government ID photos using PacFilm. This meant that for a long time, PacFilm had a massive market here and was a necessity for these uses. When digital technology replaced PacFilm for these uses, it was a big loss for the format. The format also allows for creative things like emulsion lifts or image transfers. Emulsion lift is when you put the print of the image in water and carefully remove the layer of emulsion that is the physical image. You can then transfer this onto paper or even objects. An image transfer is when you interrupt the developing process and press the negative onto a new material like watercolor paper in order to get a much more distorted, different version of the image that you took. And certain forms of PacFilm allowed you to convert the negative portion of the film into a real negative that could then be used for darkroom printing or high-resolution scanning. This was primarily something that could be done with Fuji's PacFilm later on, but could be done with Polaroid's 665, 105, and 55. Fuji's PacFilm like FP100C and FP3000B play an important part in all of this, and the Fuji side of things is what I'll be looking at in a future video. Polaroid's PacFilm format had a lot of fans. People like Andy Warhol using the Big Shot, Ansel Adams shooting with it in large format, Lucas Samaras, Ellen Carey, Guy Borden. Artists and professionals love this format in both the 3 1/4 size as well as those larger ones. There are tons of books and collections of people's work on Polaroid formats because of how creative and experimental this stuff allowed you to be. But of course, nothing lasts forever. When PacFilm was introduced, it kind of like fully replaced roll film. Roll film continued to be manufactured in like normal quantities until the 1970s. After that, it was only available in much more limited quantities with only a couple of different versions of it in black and white available into the 1990s. PacFilm, again, had more cameras, more film types, and just more possibilities that made it better than roll film. Edwin Land and Polaroid also didn't see PacFilm as the end. They saw it as a big step in the right direction towards a version of instant photography that was truly instant and only required you to push the button. And of course, Edwin Land's vision was truly realized in the 1970s when the Polaroid SX70 and their integral film was released. Film that all you had to do was press the button and then it would eject and start developing all on its own. There was no more pulling and peeling with integral film. But PacFilm still had all those different film backs and film types over the years that integral film just never had. And PacFilm survived and thrived as a format all the way up until Polaroid stop producing instant film altogether. Ignoring for just a second that Polaroid is of course making instant film again, but we're getting to that. See, in the 90s and the early 2000s, Polaroid was having a tough time. A changing digital landscape and some really bad management led to Polaroid's financial problems and the ending of production on their instant film products by 2008. Luckily, as Polaroid was leaving the PacFilm game, Fuji was producing PacFilm that was becoming more and more widely available outside of Japan. And this was stuff like FP100C and FP3000B. This stuff is really nice, but don't get your hopes up because all of this is out of production and now expired as well. After Polaroid stopped making instant film in 2008, the Impossible project was created and stepped in to save a remaining factory in the Netherlands in order to continue production of integral film. The Impossible project succeeded and became Polaroid Originals, and then within the last couple of years has become just part of Polaroid again. Integral film. That's all the Impossible project ever planned or had the ability to bring back. Polaroid right now does not make PacFilm or any sort of PacFilm alternative that can be used in these cameras. And I can't stress this enough, Polaroid probably isn't going to make PacFilm again. In the early 2000s, things were not good for that company. Between 2006 and 2008, Polaroid stopped making all instant film. They shut down factories and they just started gutting machines and facilities. And a lot of this stuff, for manufacturing, for packaging, for developing all of these different types of film formats was just lost forever. The factory in the Netherlands that the Impossible project and now just Polaroid has that is capable of manufacturing integral film was saved at literally the last minute. So from what I understand, the machines and the infrastructure that were required for Polaroid to make PacFilm just don't exist. At least not in the one factory that they have, and there's not really any other remaining Polaroid factories out there. Fuji also has no desire to share their stuff, and they haven't manufactured their PacFilm in several years now anyways. Even Florian Kaps, one of the main guys who was involved in getting the Impossible project together and saving integral film in the first place, couldn't convince Fuji or Polaroid themselves to also bring back PacFilm. Even if there are other things standing in the way, like PacFilm patents or chemical availability, the fact that Polaroid now, in terms of like their instant film stuff, is a much smaller company than it used to be, and the kind of investment that they would have to make in terms of like manufacturing facilities and infrastructure and machinery and all this stuff just to bring back PacFilm, which is also a much smaller market of a format than it used to be, means that it probably will not happen. Right now, any hope for the continuation of PacFilm as a format lies with a project called OneInstant. OneInstant is a project in Austria that was started by Florian Kaps in his effort to produce more PacFilm. It's not the same kind of PacFilm that we're used to, but it can be used in PacFilm cameras, and you can go there and order yourself some right now as I'm speaking. So I'll be tackling that subject soon as well. And also, maybe shooting some OneInstant film. Alex and I have been shooting roll film and PacFilm now, and in the future Fujifilm stuff as well, so stick around is all I'm saying. We'll see what we come up with. And if you're interested in OneInstant, there is a link in the description of the video about this stuff. So these are PacFilm cameras. They took PacFilm, which is now largely expired and largely expensive. Conversion options for these things are limited as well. I've seen ones for maybe shooting 4x5 film or like the odd Instax conversion or hack, but I do recommend staying away from these cameras if you don't have PacFilm. These cameras also seem to be less easy to convert in comparison to Polaroid's older instant roll film cameras, which I've seen people shoot like medium format in 4x5 in those. So I do believe that we're permanently past the Polaroid era of PacFilm and the variety of options that used to exist for this format. If you're thinking about diving into PacFilm today, then my advice is good luck. OneInstant is currently a big option, but buying expired Polaroid and Fuji packs are also a choice as well. Unfortunately, all of that stuff is now past its expiration date, and sometimes it's impossible to know exactly how this stuff is going to come out. It does, of course, largely depend on storage, and if you are buying expired PacFilm, which I think I've talked about once in an old video about buying expired film, then buying cold stored PacFilm is one of the best ways to ensure that you can still get pretty good results. Storing this stuff in a fridge can extend the lifespan of this stuff for years past their expiration date. And I know because Alex and I have been shooting cold stored expired PacFilm. But even when it's been stored really well, some of this stuff is really old at this point, and the chemicals are just starting to age regardless of what you do. Expired PacFilm can be inconsistent, expensive, and at this point we are sometimes decades past expiration dates. Be prepared to start paying easily over $100 for packs of 10 shots that expired in the early 2000s, or even before that. The used market for this stuff is insane. The same goes for Fuji PacFilm, but that stuff expired more recently, so it can be more expensive to get your hands on. OneInstant's current PacFilm is also pretty expensive right now, as they're in such an early stage of making it. There's FP100C from Fuji that expired in like 2018, 2019, and that is the best stuff to get if you're shooting PacFilm, but it can also be some of the most expensive stuff. I do see people ask about like cheap alternatives to the Fuji and Polaroid PacFilm stuff, and there isn't one. There's just not like a cheap version of PacFilm that is in production today that you can pick up and use in these cameras. And this makes it one of the hardest formats to recommend people get into now. But also, it's fantastic, and I'm not gonna be the one to deter you from like dropping a lot of money to get more PacFilm or to try and shoot PacFilm, because when it's good, it's so good. It's a format that was for like artists, for families, for kids, for family vacations and family portraits, for scientists, for professionals, for just so many different uses. And for such a long time, it was available in such abundance that it seems like a dream now. Many people hold it far above anything that the SX70 or the 600 or Instax cameras can ever spit out. And a massive community of people were heartbroken when Polaroid and Fuji both announced their discontinuation of this stuff. And I mean, whether it is Polaroid or Fuji or OneInstant, whoever is making PacFilm, it's always such a joy to take that picture, to pull it out of the camera, to start that timer, and to have people gather around and wait anxiously, excitedly, until that very moment where you get to peel it apart. Thank you guys so much for watching and checking this out. I will be tackling Fuji's PacFilm in the future, and this is leading up to talking about OneInstant and like the future of PacFilm now. If you didn't check out the Polaroid roll film video and my friend Alex and I out shooting expired roll film stuff, then definitely check that out too, because that was a lot of fun. And it's all possible through his work with the Ryerson University program here in Toronto for film and photography preservation, and you can find information for that specific program and the school itself in the description below. And tomorrow I will be putting up a smaller video that just showcases some of our results shooting this actual Polaroid era PacFilm stuff that is expired, but we've gotten some really interesting results from shooting all this stuff. Information and links down below for OneInstant if you're interested in jumping the gun and going over there and checking out their website and the information for their PacFilm stuff. The Analog Resurgence Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel because you love watching these videos and you get to see me make more of them and do bigger stuff as time goes on. The P.O. Box if you've got PacFilm that you want to send along yourself. It's not unheard of. Somebody really kindly sent along a pack of FP100C pretty recently. And a link to Pro 8mm out in California if you're interested in diving into Super 8 and 16mm and you're looking to buy film and cameras and resources for that stuff. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stick around because there's so much more coming up, and I'll see you guys soon.